Hello, everybody. This is Non-Duality Network Talk Radio from the beautiful studios of CKDU 88.1 FM in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia, Halifax, one of the great global centers of non-dualistic thought. You think so, Lynn? We have Lynn Fraser here. Again, Lynn, I want to make sure your microphone's working. Say something about the weather. Report the weather or something.
The weather in Nova Scotia right now is a bit stormy. There's lots of choppy waves and wind.
Okay. Well, that's Lynn Fraser. Lynn's a teacher of yoga and meditation in Halifax. And Lynn, you're a certified facilitator of Scott Kiloby's inquiries. I don't know. How come not my inquiries? I got inquiries, you know. Can I,
Scott has a method that he's developed that's very systematic. So in order to actually do this particular method, you need some training.
My inquiry is where can you get a good chili dog in Halifax? But I don't know if that'll get anyone enlightened. But it's an important question, I think.
Agreed.
I don't know. But anyway, we're going to find out about Lynn's... and you also studied Himalayan tradition, which is... some people may be familiar with that. Swami Rama, right?
Swami Rama.
Maybe
and
we'll
the
get
Himalayan
into that.
Institute.
The Himalayan Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know you're into that for quite a while. So we're going to find out all these milestones in your life, Lynn. And I guess the theme for the show is going to be just talk about your present understanding of non-duality and how it's developed over the last few years and how it relates to this the path from a meditation tradition to non-duality. We'll talk about that. But what about you? Like you've lived in Halifax not that long, a couple of years.
Yeah, just over a year and a half.
Yeah.
I've visited Halifax many times.
That's
My
right,
son,
yeah.
Dustin, who many of you know from being on the show.
Oh, I knew you reminded me of Dustin. You must be related to Dustin Lindensmith, one of our regular co-hosts here.
That's right, yeah. So he and his wife Joran moved out here 18 years ago, and so I visited a lot. And then a couple of years ago decided to move out here, and I just love it. I'm really glad I made the move.
So you like it? You're at the beach all the time?
I go for a walk on the beach at least once a week.
Yeah?
It's great.
You need to get some oceanfront property. That's what you need.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
You are?
Yeah.
How's it going? Do you think you're going to get...
Well, I've been looking at some places out along the Eastern Shore, which is a beautiful part of Nova Scotia that there's very few people and lots of natural beauty, and it's a seeking and a search right now, which is kind of has some relationship to non-duality and enlightenment too.
Yeah.
The seeking part, anyway.
Yeah. One thing we like to do in the show is define non-duality. I know I'm putting everyone on the spot when I ask them that, but you want to take a look at that topic? What's non-duality? I think it's a question that sometimes it can change, like almost from moment to moment. It changes more rapidly than the weather in Nova Scotia, I think. But like in this today, in this moment, this hour, this very second, what would you say non-duality is?
Well, it's something that I've thought a lot about and have experienced in different ways. So non-duality, as I understand it in this very second, is that it includes everything. So lots of times in a spiritual tradition or non-dual tradition, we talk about the manifest reality, meaning our bodies, our lives, our situations, our relationships, that kind of thing. And then we also can talk about consciousness or the absolute or presence. There's lots of people have different terms for that, and sometimes people call that God. So my understanding of it is that in the Western traditions we're taught about kind of original sin, and that there seems to be a separation between an individual and the divine. And in the Eastern philosophy, one of the things I just loved about it when I first became involved with meditation in the tradition, the Himalayan tradition, was the idea that in fact the idea of basic goodness, and that at our core we're all part of this divine, of the divine, and that there's no separation between me and the divine. I'm not looking for that someplace else. And then in the way that we tend to seek enlightenment, or the way that oftentimes people tend to understand it, there can still be some kind of a separation between me and enlightenment, and they're seeking towards some kind of a state that we have a preconceived idea about. So we might think, well, enlightenment or being awake is when we're always present, we're always full of joy, we have this great peace, and that's a state of consciousness. It's not really being awake. So that non-duality for me is the whole thing. It's not being caught up in the mind and the daily life, and it's not ignoring the fact that there's something bigger from which that's arising.
Yeah, I've heard people use the term totality.
Mm-hmm.
Some people prefer that to non-duality, which is sounds like what you're saying. That's great. That's one of the best descriptions of non-duality I've heard on the show. You win an award for best description of non-duality. I think we should look at your path and maybe kind of go through your life. And I like to ask people when they were young, when they were kids, did you have anything that kind of turned you toward meditation or spiritual discovery at a young age, or maybe at what age did you notice when that happened?
Well, I was brought up in Saskatchewan in the 50s and 60s. There wasn't any kind of availability of Eastern teachings or philosophy at all. But what I did have was the prairie and the sunshine and the crocuses and the grass, and I experienced non-separation in nature at a very young age. And then as the 60s kind of progressed, we were a long ways from the action, but I certainly was very interested and had a little bit of exposure to some Eastern philosophies and Buddhism. And I was always kind of interested in it through my adult life and never really connected in a sustained and meaningful way with anything until the early 90s, when I was introduced to the Himalayan tradition, which is a comprehensive tradition of yoga and meditation, philosophy, psychology, and got really, really interested in, deeply into it at that point.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a nice way to get into spirituality, I guess. It's through nature.
And it's still very much a part of my path and my life now, for sure.
Yeah, like you say, now it's kind of turned to the ocean.
Yeah.
But I know where you live. You live right on a lake, so you can just look out your window. So nature's a big part, and we have a lot of that here in Nova Scotia. A lot of oceanfront. I don't know if there's a lot, but I know there's oceanfront property for sale. People could come out here, have their own oceanfront space, and be part of the non-duality community out here in Nova Scotia. Yeah, you went to India a couple of times, didn't you? With the Himalayan Institute, you went to visit.
I went to India once in the late 90s. So I'd been involved with meditation at that time for about 5 years, and I went for a 2-week retreat and stayed for an extra couple of weeks. And it was a wonderful experience to be there.
Yeah.
I was up in Rishikesh, which is in the northern part of India and in the Himalayas. And for a kid from Saskatchewan, I never could have predicted how my life would have turned out and some of the experiences I would have had. And it was to be in India and to be experiencing what I did there was quite an interesting. It was just an interesting experience. It was so different from anything that I'd ever had before. It really kind of shakes a person up and makes you think about things a little bit differently. And to see how a different culture works with divinity and daily life and that whole thing. I was brought up in my family, people were kind of ridiculed if they had any kind of vulnerability or spiritual interest. And so for me to get involved with the meditation tradition and to actually feel a heart connection was quite a surprise. I didn't think that was going to happen for me at all. So it was quite a lovely experience. It was a bit of a honeymoon for quite a few years of learning meditation and delving deep into the practice. Understanding the mind was a big one, and understanding how I could work with my breath and doing yoga, working with the body, and how all of that kind of led into meditation, and how it all worked together as a whole was a really important part of my path. And I had great access to wonderful teachers all through those years, which was great too.
And you've become a teacher. I mean, you are a teacher.
Yes, I've
So-
been guiding meditation for, pretty soon after I started meditating, actually only about 5 years into it, I was authorized to teach in
Yeah.
the Himalayan tradition, and I've been enjoying that a lot. I've done it over the years in all kinds of different ways, and I've always really enjoyed working with people with their minds and learning to meditate, and it's always
So-
really rewarding.
So can you kind of lead us in something? Is that possible
Sure.
over the radio? Like, what would you do?
One of the things that Swami Veda, my teacher, would often suggest is to take frequent breaths.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Jerry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
To take frequent little practices during the day when we'd have just a couple of minutes of breath awareness. So if you're, riding in a car or you're doing something where you can't close your eyes, then don't close your eyes. But otherwise, if you wanted to close your eyes, become aware of your body from the top of the head, relax your face and your jaw, relax your shoulders and your arms, your belly. Become aware of your whole body. And then as you're paying attention to your body, noticing that there's breath flowing through your nostrils, which is a bit cooler on the inhalation and a bit warmer and moister on the exhalation. And that also the breath moves the body. So there's a bit of an expansion of the belly as you inhale and a relaxation as you exhale. So for a couple of minutes, we're just going to watch that flow of the breath. If you like, you can let your mind flow along with the breath. Let your awareness flow between the eyebrow center, which is between the eyebrows, just a little bit higher than the eyebrows, and the base of the nose where the nostrils meet the upper lip. And let your attention flow between those 2 points with the breath. And don't struggle with the mind. If there's thoughts coming into the mind, that's fine. Just let them be there. But our main focus right now is on this flow of the breath in the nostrils. Allow the breath to be even and smooth. Paying attention at the end of the inhalation and the end of the exhalation, so that there's no long gaps or breaks in the breath. Just this smooth, even breath, and let your mind, your awareness follow the flow of the breath. And then when you're finished, you can just open your eyes and go about your day. That would be a practice that would be, I often do that at transition points in the day. So, when I first get home from work or just before I eat or something like that, it's a great idea. And then, of course, if you're stressed and your mind is a bit choppy like our ocean is here today, then it's a great time to do something like that as well. So that would be an example of one of the early practices that I learned in the Himalayan tradition.
Can we, you have somebody you like to play called Calum Graham?
Yeah, so Callum Graham is a young guitarist. He won a lot of awards. A few years ago he won the Finger Guitarist of the Year in 2010, I think it was. I saw him play in High River, Alberta, and he's a wonderful guitarist. I really enjoyed his music. He's also quite interested in meditation, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And so I thought maybe we could have a couple of tunes by him. He's just released a new CD on, you can get it through iTunes or through callumgraham.com. And here's a listen.
Yeah, it's Caleb Graham. Nice. You discovered him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a young guy, he's like 20-something?
He's early 20s, and he's an amazing guitarist. Yeah.
So, so you know him a little, or?
I don't know him personally, but I've seen him in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a great experience. A big surprise to see someone that talented just opening for somebody else. It was fun.
He has a website. It's calumgraham.com. CALUM Graham. I think we might have another song from him later. We have to get him in the studio sometime. Bring him in sometime.
Good idea.
Where is he again? He's out in Edmonton or something?
He's born in High River, but I think he's living in the States now.
Oh, he's in the States. In covering some of your one of your huge milestones, wasn't that probably very welcome, but you had an crazy experience that I'll just let you talk about it, because this is an important part of your life, and you want to just go talk about it and tell about it?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'd been meditating for about 12 years when I had the experience that Jerry's talking about, which I'll get into in a minute. And so, 12 years in, my mind was pretty calm. I had a pretty settled meditation practice. I'd been teaching for quite a while. I'd been working with my mind. My emotions were a lot more clear and settled. I didn't have a lot of stress. Things were going quite well. Mm. And I'd had a bit of a kind of a big kind of a blip the year before, and things had kind of settled down again. And then I was riding my bike to work one day when I was physically assaulted by someone who was mentally ill and was on street drugs and not on his meds, and just thought that if he hit me, that the voices in his head would disappear. So, it was just one of those things that happen sometimes. The woman that was riding a bike behind me, who I didn't know at all, also stopped after it happened. So I was kind of driven off the bike path, and he was standing kind of over top of me, and I thought he was going to, and he did intend, he said later, to come down to where I was. But she started to scream, and she called 911, and, I didn't get killed, and I survived. Everything was fine, except that I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder from it.
Well, you felt you were going to get killed, didn't you?
I felt I was going to be killed. When I looked over my shoulder and saw him there, I just knew that if he hit me again, or if he got down there, that I would be killed. And so, one of the blessings of that was that this woman stopped and started screaming and called the police, and that didn't happen. But to the mind, the brain thought that was what was going to happen. So that's how I responded. So at that time, I didn't really know anything about post-traumatic stress disorder. And that was 2005. So even in this 8 years, there's been a whole lot of new information and people working with it, primarily driven by the military and the experience of military personnel. So, Halifax has a big naval presence, and so there's lots going on here as well.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know anything about it. I had been seeing a psychologist, and she told me, diagnosed it and said this is what I had, and gave me some really good advice about how to deal with it. Like, for instance, don't scare yourself again. So you need to give your brain some safety so that it comes out of red alert and starts to settle down. So don't go to the store if you're too scared to go outside, and, lock the car doors even if you're just out in daylight. All those kinds of things that I knew on a conscious mind, I knew I wasn't in any kind of danger. So I knew on a conscious level I wasn't in any kind of danger, but what I didn't really realize was how much the primitive brain had hijacked my mind. So it was a very interesting time for me to work with my mind. And I also, a couple months into that, had to go and testify in court, which was also another pretty traumatic experience, to have to go back and tell the story of what had happened and all of that.
And you're not supposed to do things that scare you, so that's
exactly.
not pleasant.
Yeah, but I had some great help and great strategies on how to deal with that, so it went as well as it could have. But what I really got during that time was that meditation had brought me to a certain point where my mind was, I had a lot of awareness of what was going on in my mind, but I still had this idea that I could control my mind through my conscious thought and through these practices. And I found out that in fact didn't work when you're in a big kind of a crisis like that one was. So what I started doing was I did a lot of restorative yoga practices and a lot of guided relaxations. I found I couldn't meditate because the flashbacks would just kind of come over and take over my mind. I couldn't do any kind of regular meditation practice, but I could do guided relaxations. And I learned to not be so aggressive with myself, with my mind, to think, well, you know, I know that this isn't, I'm not in any danger, so I should be able to get over this. And that was not helpful at all, to have that kind of aggressive kind of approach to it. So it really helped me to see how the mind works when it's under a condition of extreme stress, and to realize that I needed to work on it at a level other than the conscious mind. That the conscious mind wasn't the problem.
Was that frustrating? Because, you know, here you're a meditator.
Yeah.
You know, why can't I just meditate? But you had to more focus on, sounds like, just the body. The tension in the body. And, you know, the breath, working with the breath was very powerful. And in the Himalayan tradition, we have a lot of deep shavasana practices, which are relaxation practices that work with the levels of the mind that are below the conscious layer of thought. So I did a lot of those practices, which Yoga Nidra is one of them, Blue Star is one of them. So it was really wonderful for me to have all that knowledge about the breath and about these practices that I could do. And I worked with that very intensely over several months as things started to heal. And it was really a good, it was a good awareness for me that all of these things that happen kind of underground can be worked with in a very loving, kind way. That there was nothing wrong with how I worked with that, you know, contrary to my opinions on how I should be able to just get over it. But it was really good practice to be with reality as it was. And the reality is that my brain was very deterred. You know, I was on red alert, and I needed to do some things that would help to calm that down. So you can see how the experience helps you develop how you were defining non-duality as a totality. Because of what you've experienced. And that, you know, so often we have an experience that we think should be different from what actually is. And so we put a lot of energy into wishing it was different or resisting what was actually going on. And, you know, the more that we can actually accept what's going on, then the more clear we are, the better that we can work with it. And we can't actually work with something that we can't see. And the other thing that I've really, I observed then, but also during all the years that I've been working with people teaching meditation, is that we have defense mechanisms in the mind that come in when we need protection. And that's part of what post-traumatic stress is. And when the primitive brain goes on red alert, it's kind of protecting us from, people talk about, well, I went into shock, I didn't, and that experience happened to me as well that time. I didn't actually remember anything about the actual assault for 3 or 4 days, and then the flashbacks started coming and I couldn't get it out of my mind. So, our mind works in a way that's protective of us, and it's also, it can be kind of hurt by some of the things that happen when we get a big shock. And so, when we have a relatively calm period in our life, when there isn't a lot of big trauma going on, it's a great time to learn practices and to get into the breath and to work with the body and to work with the mind, because it's not, life isn't just calm seas. Oftentimes we'll experience something that's a bit more challenging. And then when something gets challenging, to not resist the challenge of it, but to just also accept that, okay, now is a time when it's a little bit harder for me to maintain equilibrium, and I can use some of these practices to not get into resisting it, or to not be so aggressive with myself, or to let go of some of my judging and expectations. That's really important. You have one of the other songs by Calum Graham is kind of, maybe it's points to this non-resistance. Called It Is What It Is. You want to play that now? You want to say anything else to preface this with anything? Or?
Well, in a minute after we play that, I'd like to talk a little bit about Scott Kiloby's inquiries, and particularly the anxiety inquiry, because that really kind of grew out of my experience with post-traumatic stress disorder. But yeah, let's play Calum's. That's one of my favorite things to say. It is what it is, and it helps to remind me that we can't always change the external world.
I got inquiries too. I got to find out where to get a good Chinese meal around here, a good buffet. Okay, here's Calum Green. some more of Calum Graham, it is what it is. That's one of your favorite expressions, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Well,
reminds me about reality.
It is what it is, whatever. And one of your next milestones in your life then, and that was a heck of a milestone, PTSD. I mean that's very, very serious, and like you say, maybe it pertains to some people in Halifax. It's a military town, and I guess there's some relevance locally. And then you met Scott Kiloby, and I think I was there when you met Scott.
You were, Jerry. So, for the listeners, I had met Jerry a number of times over the years because he and my son Dustin are friends. And he came to Lethbridge, Alberta, to the Paradoxica conference, which was a great non-dual psychology conference.
We were both there. Barry Nixon's conference he runs every year, and people can go to paradoxica.ca. It was a great conference. He does a great job there, Gary.
And so Jerry was one of the speakers. He started us off talking about non-duality and what it is. And then Scott Kiloby was at that weekend as well. And I got a little bit interested in, I loved Scott and what he had to say. He wasn't doing kind of the systematic inquiries quite the way he is now. But he certainly had the inquiries. He was developing them. And he has such a presence and such a way about him. He just, I was very drawn to how he was working with his mind and with non-duality. And I did a couple of private sessions with him. All of these facilitations mostly happen over Skype, which is the same way as it is now. And then when he put out a little blurb about doing some facilitator training on these inquiries, the living inquiries as they're called, I was really interested and went on board and started working quite intensely with it. So the living inquiries, I'll just explain for people who might not be familiar. So you can go to kiloby.com and learn a lot about Scott's work. So there's two main components. One is the living inquiries, which I'll explain in a minute. And then he also does a lot of work on addiction. And he's just setting up a new center, the Kiloby Center for Recovery in Palm Springs, which will be opening early in 2013. But the living inquiries...
2014, I guess.
2014,
yeah.
Sorry, in January. Yeah, this January. The living inquiries look at three things. So we have words, and we have images or pictures, and we have sensations or energies or feelings. And what Scott has discovered over many years of working with this with himself and with other people
is... Scott suffered dealt with his own addictions.
Yeah,
right?
he certainly
coming out
has.
of that himself. So.
Yeah, he's had 20 years of working with his own addictions, and he wasn't really addicted to chocolate ice cream the way I am. He was more addicted to drugs. So
what does he know?
He was... so he had an awakening, kind of a spiritual awakening, one of the kind of big ones that people hear about. And then he discovered that he still had a lot of room to work with himself and the mind. And so what he discovered with the way that we tend to work with the mind is we have these words, these pictures, or these sensations, and that when they're stuck together, what he calls the Velcro effect, that they can have a charge for us. And so this is one of the ways that we identify ourselves with our bodies and our lives, is that these things are stuck together. So he developed these three inquiries. The unfindable inquiry, the question is that me, what I'm looking for? So if we're looking for, the one who's unlovable or something like that, and we have this word or this picture or this body sensation, the question is that the one we're looking for? Is that a self who's unlovable? If we're looking at the anxiety inquiry, which is relevant to what we were just talking about with the post-traumatic stress disorder, then we would look at, for instance, a body sensation. If I have a lot of contraction through my shoulders, or if I have a feeling of tightness in my gut or something, we'd look at that and see if that feeling, if there's a threat in that feeling, or if there's a threat in the words, I'm not safe, or whatever that is that we're looking at. And so most of these inquiries are done on a one-on-one basis with a trained facilitator. And also there's a lot of information about how to do them yourselves as well. A lot of people find that for things that have a lot of charge, it's really helpful to have someone sit with them and do that, because it helps you to keep on track, and it helps you to have someone else doing the process, so you can just sink right into the inquiry. And then he co-developed with Colette Kelso a compulsion inquiry, which in that case, the question, we're still looking at words and images and sensations, but the question is, where is the compulsion or the command to do that activity? So if you're working with smoking, for instance, is it in the picture of the cigarette package? Is it in the feeling in your body? So we're just looking at what tends to happen is that these things come up. We look at them individually, these 3 items, and then they tend to peel away and get a bit unstuck. And my experience has been that they lose their power. So we begin to see how they work. So this worked really directly with how to work with the mind and the training that I'd had in meditation. I've never found anything in the kind of non-dual world that's at conflict with what I learned in the meditation tradition. It's all, to learn how the mind works and to really, Scott's developed a method that's very potent and very effective and quite simple as well in really seeing through our identification with these things.
We need an example because can you
Sure.
bring this, can people try this?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay.
So normally speaking, the inquiries would take, maybe a half an hour to an hour if you were being facilitated. And so we're going to do a very kind of short version of that.
Yeah.
Most people can relate to some kind of contraction in their body. And so in meditation, we talk about, if you have tightness in your body, we have habitual places where we have tightness. So we might have the forehead and the eyebrows. Oftentimes that's a place where people knit their brows and kind of when they're worrying. Sometimes people have tight jaw, might be the back of the shoulders. When we're doing the inquiries, oftentimes there's energy in the throat or the heart area or in the belly. So if you could just think, the listeners, if you could just tune into your body, and if there's some place in your body where you feel some kind of a sensation or contraction or tightness, just tune into that for a minute. So be aware of your whole body, from the top of the head right down through to the toes. And notice that there's the space that your body is occupying. And there's the space outside the body, and there's, the air on your skin and the feeling of your clothes. There's all of these sensations. And there might also be a sensation of tightness or contraction someplace inside your body. So when you're doing this wouldn't be kind of on its own. It would be part of the inquiry, but it is kind of a nice little standalone tool as well. So just pay attention to that sensation in your body right now. Usually when we have a sensation of tightness or pain or contraction, we try and do something to get rid of it. So we're not trying to get rid of it. We're really just trying to pay attention, to tune in, to allow it to be there without wishing it to be not there. So really notice the shape. Sometimes it has a temperature or a color. And notice as you're paying attention to this sensation, notice if there's any words that come up. Sometimes there could be some kind of a judgment around it. This feels bad, or this means I'm something. So notice if there's any words and just have a look at the words. Notice if there's any pictures or memories. And then really continue to come back to the sensation. You're just interested in this sensation. Sometimes we might kind of put out a question, is this sensation had a voice? Is there something that it's trying to tell me? But that doesn't have to be a kind of a verbal question. It could be just more of an interest. Sometimes the sensation will feel kind of overwhelming. Just remembering that you're breathing, you're sitting here in the moment. That whatever's going on in terms of associations of words or memories It's just being experienced right here in the moment. I'm not trying to get rid of the sensation or make it do anything. Sometimes this works really well on long-standing sensations that we've had. I used to have a feeling of tightness and contraction behind my shoulder blades that has completely disappeared since I started doing these inquiries. Actually, about 6 months into it, I noticed that I didn't have that sensation in my body anymore. 6 months into it, I noticed that I didn't have that sensation in my body anymore. And if we could really sit with some of those long-standing sensations that we've had in our body, oftentimes some words will come up, or sometimes you could ask yourself, is this a familiar sensation? When's some other times that I felt this sensation? And then just do the inquiries on that. Notice the words and the pictures that come up. And like I said, it's great to do these a facilitated inquiry if it's something that's quite intense, but anybody can just have a look at the sensations in the body and notice that it's going on. And that was one of the things that I noticed when I've gone through a period of a bit of emotional choppiness or tension, is that my shoulders, which had completely relaxed over quite a few years of doing meditation, all of a sudden I'd find them creeping back up to my ears again. And then I'd notice them because I was noticing my body, and I'd relax my shoulders down again. And then a few minutes later, I'd notice there they were up again. And so it's a great way to work with your body. It's a good cue.
Yeah.
When you notice that there's some kind of contraction in your body.
Yeah, I'm just noticing my shoulders are all.
Yeah, and often that's just habitual. The mind.
And it doesn't go. I mean, I saw Scott posted something on Facebook, and he's the inventor of this and all this. And he wrote something. He said about how a lump in his throat arose. Well, maybe he was just noticing it and writing about it. Today, a lump in my throat arose. Maybe it was some forgotten sadness I was never aware of. So the great benefit of this method, and I mean, you look at these contractions in as all these different dimensions from all different sides to see whether it's really there. But at the end of the day, I mean, things can still arise.
Things can still arise, yes. It's not about getting rid of things, right? I have an example, too, of I had one of the sessions that I had when I was being facilitated, probably about a year ago, was I was dealing with something that happened that was quite painful from when I was 12 years old. And I had, dealt with it in a lot of different ways before, but I was just sitting with it, and by then I had enough confidence in the facilitator that I was able to kind of stay with it. So, she's saying, just stay with the sensation as long, just let it be there. And it was this intense pain in my heart that if I hadn't known better, I would have thought I was having a heart attack or something, but I knew I wasn't. I was just dealing with this. And after about 3 minutes of that intense pain, it lifted. And I've never experienced that pain before. And that incident that had happened at the time, too, has never been that painful for me to recall after that. Because it was like just sitting with it. And I thought, for almost 50 years, I've avoided that 3 minutes of sitting with that pain. And so that kind of sold me on the power of these inquiries, that they're very powerful.
Yeah, that's massive. That's huge, yeah.
Well, and I know from teaching meditation and working with people on my mind, but also with other people on what they're having obstacles kind of to relaxing and to being present, is that so much of the problem is that we're resisting. We think something should have happened a different way than it actually did. We judge ourselves for the way that we're living our lives and the way that we're thinking, and we have a lot of aggression, and it's really wonderful to be able to just let go of that and be with what actually is without having to make it be different from what it is. That's probably been the biggest benefit of all of these years of meditation, but in particular, Scott's inquiries have been wonderful to work with that.
Sitting with what is, but you have to see what is. So this is a method.
Yes, it's a method.
When I spent a time with him, several hours there on that Sunday, it really helped me because I observed some of my own contraction. And I kind of knew what was behind it, but I never really looked at it with as much crystal clarity as with as when Scott was he's actually guiding someone else through the process.
Right, yeah.
But when someone else is being guided through, you just go through with your own stuff. That's all.
Yeah,
it's very helpful, very powerful.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
So I actually brought a clip by Adyashanti, who's another non-dual teacher who's very clear and a wonderful teacher, and he's talking about thought. So we're going to get into thought a little bit after this as well, but it'd be fun to listen to him. He's this is quite a fun little clip.
It is, and the part where it starts, he's talking about thought as being like almost like being an alcoholic almost. And so that's how it kind of starts out. We're kind of addicted to thought. Adyashanti.
It's just like if you go to an AA program, you go in there and, first thing you confess is, gee, I'm really powerless about this. So I'm told. First, you got to admit that, right? It'd be great if spiritual people could come to grips with that. AA for the mind. I have a mind. It thinks. I'm powerless to control it. No. That's not what we do, is it? Not me, baby. I'm not powerless. I've been powerless my whole life, but I'm sure. Just give me another technique. I'll get a grip on this thing. I'm not an addict. Not me. That probably should be the first thing in any church. We're gonna have a Thoughts Anonymous meeting here, folks. You're not even going to hear the sermon unless you get through this Thoughts Anonymous. You have a sponsor in the 12 steps. Write down your little, your papers of how much it's harmed everybody in your life. Boy, literally, think about it. Just spend 10 minutes. How many people have I harmed with my thoughts and words? Oh, man. Talk about sobering. How many people have I hurt with my thoughts and words? That'll sober you up real quick, won't it? Wow. How many times have I hurt myself in the last 60 minutes with my thoughts and words? How many times in a lifetime? You see? So, you see what I'm doing with you, which is really with us, right? Is, so when we start to see, because this is universal, isn't it? I mean, that's why we're all laughing about it. It's because there's total unity. And yes, okay, this is basically the human condition. And that's what you're experiencing. It's not personal. It's not about you. It's not a personal failing. It's a human condition thing. It's the ultimate conditioning. It's the ultimate addiction. And when we start to see it, there's a certain sobering. Because now it's not just technique. How do I not do this? First, you start to see the tremendous cost. Because for all the spiritual books I've read in my life, hundreds of them, it's amazing. I read over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Here's how to deal with thought. 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 And all of which maybe have a place. But there's almost like this, nobody's saying, God, have you ever noticed the immensity of violence that thought has created for you? For the people in your life. How many people you've hurt and devastated with a thought, with a word. You meaning me, you, us, all of us in our lifetimes in the last 24 hours. And when this examination, when this recognition is missing, then all the technique in the world is meaningless, isn't it? Right? Just like an alcoholic, until they can walk in the door and say, not only do I drink, but God, has it hurt me, and has it hurt so many people in my life, and has it destroyed a lot only then is the next step taken. If they take the next step without that, they're going to keep doing it. So they think this is really, right? Because you notice, just in the recognition of it, I don't know if you notice, if you're really in the recognition of it, recognizing that it's a universal thing, it's not personal, therefore judging it is of no use, serves no purpose. Yeah. See, the thought itself quiets down. You noticed? Thought quiets down. Thought, it's the truth that starts to free us. It's seeing things the way they are. It's seeing things very clearly. I mean, I literally think for most people it would be much more useful to, instead of sitting every morning, let's say if they sat for a morning for an hour for the next 7 days trying to quiet their thoughts, is just an experiment. Sit for an hour every 45 minutes every morning and just contemplate the incredible destructiveness that compulsive thinking and words and talking has done.
Wow, I'm freaked out now. Like I've been hurting people all this time. I got to stop thinking.
One of the cool things about meditation and about watching the mind is learning how to witness the thoughts as they come up and learning how to see the thoughts as a process. So, we don't have a lot of, we don't really know what the next thought's going to be that comes into our mind, and we don't really, we don't control our thoughts. The thoughts are kind of a mysterious process. But one thing that's worth to remember too is that there's a whole layer of experience in the mind that's below that level of thought, that a lot of times we'll identify ourselves with that top layer of the thought, and we'll put our memories on a timeline, and we really identify that, oh yeah, that's who I am. And so learning how to witness this thought stream and to witness the thoughts as a process that comes up is very helpful in terms of giving a larger perspective on our lives, and to ideally to be able to contact that stillness in the depths of the mind and not be quite so identified with that kind of top layer of the thinking mind. It's very helpful.
But again, it's like the contractions that arise. It's not a way. You don't want to get rid of thoughts.
Right. We're not trying to get rid of them. We are trying to not be so caught up in them that's all we see, so that we don't just identify with that layer of thought. So to be able to back up a little bit and be more of a witness to the thoughts, and that's certainly something I've learned in the Himalayan tradition as well, and continue to work with, is to witness the thoughts and to learn about the mind. It's a fascinating journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is so much about what non-duality is. This is like the practical benefit of the non-dual teachings. This is practical, to give yourself distance from the craziness, the thoughts. Mm-hmm. Not just the thoughts and what's going on in the body.
Right.
The physical, the contractions, which are often known as pain, physical pain, and everything associated with it. So.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a very practical person. Ideas are good, and an understanding of how things are good. But if we get that experience through our own lives by watching it and learning how to work with it, that really it can take us a lot deeper into really understanding it, rather than just kind of understanding the thought layer about all of that. So it's fun to work with that. And in the non-duality group that Jerry Katz and a few other people started, that continues to meet a couple times a month, we do exactly that. We go deeply into experience. It's good. Yeah,
you're a big part of that, and you bring your approach, and you bring your guided meditations. Instead of 5 minutes here, you can spend an hour or a half hour, 40 minutes or whatever.
I think the silence that we bring to the groups is often appreciated by a lot of people that come. There's a great group of co-hosts. It's always something different. It's kind of casual and often unusual, and it's really fun.
It is. And are you going to the Christmas party, December 15th? Can you go? I know.
I'm not too sure.
Dustin can't go.
Yeah, there's kind of a potluck and
all kinds of stuff. But a few people have signed up for it, so it'd be good if you can go. And And I'd like to bring more people from our group into the studio there, right to the chair you're in.
There's a lot of depth in the group. It'd be great to do that.
It's we have a lot of a lot of great people. We'll bring them here, talk to them, play their music, do their teachings if they have any, and talk to everybody. I think that's our show for today. Lynn Fraser, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
You're going to be back. Whether you like it or not, we're going to bring you back as a guest, maybe as a co-host, as a guest, as what else? What are the other options? Whatever, you can you'll be here. And we were talking earlier about you coming, booking a date in January with maybe a guest on the air. We'll be talking about that. And your website is nondualinquiry.com, is it?
Right, nondualinquiry.com, and then my yoga meditation website is stillpointyoga.ca. So it's stillpointyoga.ca.
Are you teaching any classes in town right now, or
I
what?
have a few coming up. I have a guided silent retreat on New Year's Day, and some meditation classes soon, and the spiritual book club. There's lots going on.
You have a spiritual book club, yeah, that's good.
It's also fun.
Right now you're reading an Adyashanti.
Yes, we're doing an Adyashanti book, yes.
Well, this is great. You came to the city, you're taking charge, you're doing things, you're part of it.
Having fun.
We're all working together, you know.
Yeah.
And that's
I
important.
appreciate, Jerry, what you've done to foster that. It's wonderful. Good atmosphere to be in.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a good atmosphere for a lot of people. Here's some music by Prasad called I Am Free. We always close the show on this. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you, CKDU. Thank you, listeners. Andrew was at our last meeting. Andrew from Ottawa. He listens to our show in Ottawa. So
cool.
Shout out to Andrew and everybody in the Non-Duality Satsang group. Yeah. My co-creator of this show, Mandy LaBelle at yogaheart.ca. Hey, Mandy. Bye, everybody. See you soon.